Newlywed couple bought a $5 storage unit no one wanted, not knowing it once belonged to a billionaire. $5. Going once, going twice. Sold. Nobody wanted the rusted storage unit at the end of the lot. But when Joseph cracked the ancient trunk open, his face went white. Gold coins, revolutionary energy blueprints, and a warning scrawled in the margins. If you're reading this, I'm already dead, and they're coming for you next. The billionaire who owned this unit didn't abandon it. He was murdered for what's inside. What started as a desperate gamble to pay off debt became a fight for their lives. Because the technology hidden in that unit, it could end the world's energy crisis. And there are people who will kill to keep it buried. Stay with me, this gets insane. Hey, welcome back to the family. Real quick, if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. I've got a backlog of wild emotional stories coming your way, and this one might be the craziest yet. Don't let the algorithm hide it from you. Hit subscribe, and let's jump in. Madison and Joseph Benjamin were just an ordinary couple, newly married and doing their best to navigate the endless tide of bills, debts, and responsibilities that seemed to grow heavier each day. Their cramped apartment in the city's less-than-ideal neighborhood was barely big enough to fit their dreams, let alone their hopes for a better future. Madison, with her degree in marketing, spent her days managing social media campaigns for a small, underpaid marketing firm. Joseph, a talented engineer, worked long hours as an auto mechanic just to cover the basics, his hands often stained with motor oil as he repaired engines instead of designing them. Despite their degrees and hard work, the couple found themselves drowning in student loans, overdue credit card bills, and the constant fear of never making ends meet. Rent was due, utilities were creeping up on them, and Madison's latest notice from the loan servicer carried the all-too-familiar threat of wage garnishment. At 26, Madison had always believed that hard work would eventually pay off, but she was beginning to question that assumption. Standing in the cramped kitchen of their apartment one morning, staring at the pile of overdue bills, she couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard they worked, they would always be just one step behind. Joseph, at 28, felt much the same. He knew that the steady job at the auto repair shop couldn't solve all their problems, but he kept his head down, focused on the work at hand. He had learned early on that when money couldn't solve a problem, hard work and sweat would. He was grateful for his job but knew that it wasn't going to bring him the freedom and security they both craved. Their quiet mornings before the grind of work was the only time they truly had to themselves, but even then, a cloud of stress hovered over them. But that morning was different. It was early Saturday, and the couple had just finished breakfast when Joseph glanced at the local classifieds, a ritual he often did when he felt particularly frustrated with their financial situation. "There's an auction today," he said, flipping through the pages. "A storage unit auction. They're selling off forgotten storage units. You know, the kind of stuff people leave behind when they can't pay." Madison looked up from her phone, distracted by the growing list of bills in her inbox. "What's the point? It's probably just junk." "I don't know," Joseph replied, his brow furrowed in thought. "Maybe there's something valuable in one of them. It's a gamble. But we could use a break. We don't have anything to lose." It was a long shot, a far cry from a plan that could actually help them get ahead, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "I'll go if you want," Madison said with a sigh, still not entirely convinced. "But I'm not getting my hopes up." The couple grabbed their jackets and drove to the auction site, a worn-down warehouse on the outskirts of town, where dozens of old storage units lined the lot, each one up for auction. The place smelled of musty air, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead as the auctioneer began rattling off the details. The other bidders, a mix of bargain hunters and antique dealers, seemed much more experienced. They eyed the units with the practiced gaze of people who had spent years rooting through other people's castaways. Madison and Joseph, on the other hand, had no experience with storage unit auctions. Their initial plans were simple: to find a unit with anything of value that they could quickly flip for a profit. Maybe a few vintage items, or something of historical significance, anything that would help make a dent in their mounting debts. They hadn't come looking for treasure. They'd come looking for a break. The bidding was fierce on most units, with experienced buyers raising their paddles without hesitation, confident they knew what they were doing. But as the last unit of the day came up for auction, something strange happened. The unit was small, tucked away at the far end of the lot, and appeared to have been untouched for years. Its door was covered in rust, and the lock was thick with dust. The auctioneer described it as an old, forgotten unit with a low starting price. No one bid, not even the hardened veterans. It seemed like the kind of unit that had been forgotten, its contents long discarded as trash. Madison and Joseph exchanged a glance. Joseph raised his hand, slightly unsure but hopeful. The gavel slammed down. $5. Going once, going twice. Sold. They had won at $5 for the unit no one wanted. The couple could barely believe their luck as they walked toward the small unit. $5. It was the price of one fast food meal. And here they were, with a whole unit of mystery in front of them. They grabbed the key from the auctioneer, not knowing what to expect inside, but secretly hoping for anything that might help them pay off a few bills. The door groaned as Joseph turned the old, rusted lock, and when it finally creaked open, a thick cloud of dust billowed out, revealing nothing but shadows and clutter. The smell of old wood and stale air filled their lungs. At first, it seemed like an ordinary storage space. Old furniture, boxes of books, random household items. It looked like someone had used it as a dumping ground for years. Well, that was anticlimactic, Madison said, brushing off her hands and preparing to turn back. Joseph didn't respond. He had noticed something odd behind the boxes of forgotten knickknacks. There was a trunk, a heavy, wooden chest that was tucked away beneath the piles of old furniture, almost as if someone had tried to hide it. The chest was ancient, with metal straps that had long since turned a dark brown with age, and a heavy lock that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. "Hold on," Joseph muttered, kneeling to inspect the trunk. Madison watched, feeling a twinge of curiosity. "Do you think it's locked?" she asked, almost as an afterthought. But she could see the determined look on Joseph's face. He was already setting to work on the lock with a crowbar they had found nearby. A few moments later, the crowbar slipped and the lock cracked open with a satisfying snap. Joseph lifted the lid, and inside was a trove of carefully wrapped items. His hands trembled as he pulled out the first object, a stack of yellowed papers, some kind of blueprints, tied neatly with twine. They seemed official, far too official for an abandoned storage unit. Madison gasped as she saw the first document clearly labeled in bold text: Patent Application, Atmospheric Energy Conversion Technology, Graham Holloway, Principal Inventor. Joseph's hands shook. This is a patent for something huge. "What is it?" Madison asked, her heart pounding in her chest as she scanned the documents. But it wasn't just the papers that caught her attention. Underneath the papers were several gold coins, their intricate designs nearly worn off with age. Madison reached for one and felt its weight in her hand. It was heavy, ancient, and unmistakably valuable. "There's more," Joseph said, pulling out another object, a set of what appeared to be finely crafted blueprints, detailing a complex design for a machine that seemed to defy conventional physics. The diagrams were unlike anything either of them had ever seen. "It looks like a device that could change everything," Joseph murmured, his voice almost reverent. But just as they began to process the magnitude of what they had found, Madison spotted something else. Tucked away in the corner of the trunk was a letter, a faded and crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it gently, reading the words scrawled in elegant handwriting. "Do not let them find this. If you do, they will stop at nothing to bury it. The world is not ready for what we've discovered." Madison's heart raced. The words felt like a warning that was now directly connected to their lives. This was no ordinary storage unit. They had just uncovered the secret of a lifetime. As Madison and Joseph looked at the letters, the rare coins, and the complex blueprints, they realized that this was no longer about paying off a few bills or making a quick buck. They had uncovered something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. But now they had to decide. What would they do with this discovery? And who else might want to stop them from exposing the truth? Madison and Joseph sat in the dim light of their apartment, the stack of documents spread out across their small kitchen table like a treasure map leading to something they couldn't quite grasp. The rare gold coins were placed carefully to the side, and the complex blueprints drawings for a device that seemed beyond anything either of them had ever seen were covered in a layer of dust, but the documents called to them, one by one. At first, it all felt like a lucky find, something to sell for quick cash. But the more they sifted through the papers, the more they realized they hadn't just bought some random junk. The storage unit hadn't been abandoned. It had been carefully hidden, and everything inside had been placed there for a reason. The papers, the coins, the blueprints, each item seemed to reveal a part of a much larger puzzle. Joseph ran his fingers over the edges of a patent application and began reading aloud. Patent for atmospheric energy conversion technology, Graham Holloway. Principal inventor. His voice was filled with disbelief. Madison frowned as she read over his shoulder. Atmospheric energy? That sounds impossible. But the more she read, the more it became clear that Holloway, whoever he was, had figured out something incredible. The idea of harnessing energy from the environment, limitless power from the air itself, was a dream that had been whispered about in scientific circles for years. To read about it on paper, in what appeared to be a legitimate patent application, felt like a revelation. This is huge, Joseph murmured, flipping through the technical drawings. These aren't just scribbles. These are detailed plans for a machine, something that could literally change the world. Madison's pulse quickened. They were holding history in their hands. But what kind of history? Who was Graham Holloway, and why had he kept this invention a secret for so long? The couple spent the next few days piecing together the life of Graham Holloway. Each new letter they uncovered seemed to add a layer of intrigue, a new piece of the puzzle that made the invention seem even more extraordinary. Holloway had clearly been a man who preferred to work in isolation. From the letters, Madison learned that Holloway was a reclusive billionaire, living in the shadows of the corporate world, not seeking fame or fortune but driven by the need to create. Joseph was fascinated by the technical side of things, but for Madison, it was the personal details that sparked her curiosity. Holloway had kept to himself, building his wealth through secret ventures, investments in industries that ranged from high-tech innovation to energy companies, most of which had vanished without a trace. He was a man of mystery, and as Madison read through his personal notes, she began to feel like they were uncovering something that had been buried on purpose. He had amassed his wealth quietly, through cutting-edge inventions that never saw the light of day. The patents they had found were just the tip of the iceberg. The more they read, the more it became clear. Holloway's invention was something so groundbreaking, so dangerous to the status quo, that it had to be hidden away. In fact, he had made it a point to destroy all traces of his work, save for a few carefully hidden blueprints. It was as if he had known that revealing his invention would make him a target. And yet, Holloway had been determined to release it to the world. In a letter he had written to a trusted business partner, Holloway described his plans for global distribution. His invention, he wrote, could replace fossil fuels, end energy scarcity, and provide unlimited power to the world without polluting the environment. He had created something revolutionary. But just as Madison and Joseph were starting to understand the magnitude of his work, they realized that Holloway's letter to his partner had ended abruptly. There was no closure, no final plan. Holloway's tone shifted toward fear in the last few lines. He had been afraid of something, or someone. "Joseph," Madison said one evening as she flipped through more of Holloway's papers, "look at this." She pointed to the letter she had found tucked behind a set of blueprints. This was the last communication he had with someone named Victor Dorian. It seems like they were going to work together to release the invention. But Joseph read the letter aloud, his voice growing more serious as he went on. "I'm afraid I can't continue this work as planned. I've had too many close calls. If anything happens to me, promise you'll take over. But for now, I have to keep it hidden. The world is not ready for what we've discovered." Madison's stomach sank. That's it. That's where the letter ends. Joseph's brow furrowed. What happened to him? Why did he stop communicating with his partner? Madison stared at the faded ink on the page, her mind racing. He was hiding this invention for a reason. Maybe someone was after him. The more they uncovered about Graham Holloway, the clearer it became that his life had been a secret in itself. Holloway's technology had the potential to disrupt entire industries, and that made it dangerous. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a man who had created something so powerful that the energy world, and the corporations that controlled it, would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. The documents and patents they had found were just pieces of the puzzle. As Madison and Joseph continued their search, they began to realize the scope of what Holloway had done. His invention wasn't just a machine. It was the key to limitless energy, a device that could harness the natural energy that existed in the atmosphere itself. It was a technology that could power entire cities, countries, maybe even the world. The implications were staggering. But why had Holloway kept it hidden for so long? Why had he not made it public, if it could help humanity so much? As they pored over more documents, they found another letter, this one from Holloway to a government official. It read, "I have no intention of seeking approval from any government body. If the world is to benefit from my discovery, it must be through open-source collaboration. I will not allow my work to be controlled or used for profit. I've seen what happens when powerful forces seize control of technologies like this, and I will not let that happen to mine." Madison's heart skipped a beat. Holloway wasn't just afraid for himself. He was afraid of the people who would try to use his invention to maintain control, people who would stop at nothing to suppress a technology that could threaten their power. As Madison and Joseph continued to sift through the remaining contents of the storage unit, they found more than just patents and blueprints. Tucked beneath the papers and documents were rare artifacts, old coins from various cultures, priceless paintings, and a stash of gold bullion that glistened under the dim light of their apartment. It became clear that Graham Holloway hadn't just been an inventor, he had lived a life of luxury, wealth, and influence. Joseph was the first to speak. "These aren't just artifacts. This is a hidden fortune. He must have been living under the radar for a reason, hiding both his wealth and his invention." Madison picked up one of the gold coins, admiring its intricate design. How did this end up here, in a storage unit that no one wanted? Joseph shook his head. "I think we've only scratched the surface of what Holloway left behind. He was more than just an inventor, he was a man who had the means to make his dreams a reality. And then some." As they explored the wealth hidden in the trunk, they began to understand just how significant their find was. Holloway had lived a life of secrecy, but in the end, his work had been left behind, forgotten by most. But now, in their hands, the discovery wasn't just about wealth. It was about the knowledge and power that Holloway had tried to keep hidden, and it was now in their grasp. Madison turned to Joseph, her eyes wide with shock. "Joseph, look at this." She held up another letter from Holloway to his partner. This one was much more cryptic than the others. Holloway had written, "The key to my invention is not just the technology. It's in the knowledge of how we got here. But it's too dangerous to release. They'll come for it. They'll come for me. I'm already being watched." The letter ended abruptly, with a note that read, "If I don't make it, Victor, promise me, you'll destroy everything." Joseph clenched his fists. Someone was after him. And now, we've stumbled onto his legacy. If Holloway was afraid, we have to wonder why. Madison could feel the weight of the situation settling over them. They had discovered a secret so powerful that it could change the world, but it was clear that someone didn't want it to be found. The couple was no longer just dealing with forgotten treasures, they were dealing with a legacy that had been carefully hidden away, and the truth was now theirs to uncover. But at what cost? Madison and Joseph sat in stunned silence, realizing that their simple $5 gamble had turned into something far more dangerous. What had Holloway discovered, and why had it cost him everything? They now had the keys to a secret that could shake the foundations of the world, but the deeper they dug, the more they realized that their discovery might cost them their lives. The game was no longer about treasure. It was about survival. Madison and Joseph spent the next few days buried in Graham Holloway's documents, trying to make sense of the tangled web they had inadvertently uncovered. Each piece of paper, each faded letter seemed to reveal more about the life of the mysterious inventor, a man who had spent decades hiding his work from the world. But as they delved deeper into Holloway's life, they found something far darker than they ever expected. This wasn't just a man and his invention. This was a story of corporate giants, secret networks, and a life driven by fear, betrayal, and the need for secrecy. Joseph was hunched over the kitchen table, skimming through Holloway's journals. They had found a wealth of information, plans, patents, even personal diaries detailing the inventor's struggles, his triumphs, and the technology that had been hidden for so long. But as Joseph flipped through a particularly worn leather journal, he stopped abruptly. "Madison, come here," he said, his voice filled with tension. Madison stood up from the couch, where she had been reading a legal document concerning Holloway's business dealings. "What's wrong?" Joseph's fingers trembled as he pointed to a passage in the journal. "Look at this. Holloway was more than just an inventor, he was in a fight for his life." Madison leaned over his shoulder and read the passage aloud. "And asterisk, they'll stop at nothing to suppress this invention. My work will never see the light of day as long as these corporations control the world's energy. They own the politicians, the media, the banks. If I try to go public, they'll bury me, and they'll bury my technology with me. I can't trust anyone, no one can know about this, except those I've already brought in." Asterisk. Madison's heart sank. She had known the invention was valuable, but she had assumed Holloway's greatest obstacle had been funding or lack of support. She hadn't expected him to be running from something far more dangerous, powerful forces that would go to any length to keep his invention suppressed. "They were already trying to silence him," Madison said quietly, her fingers tracing the words on the page. Holloway's worst fear wasn't just that his technology would be stolen, it was that they would kill him to prevent it from ever being shared. Joseph nodded grimly. And it seems like he was right. These corporations, big oil, gas, even some of the largest energy companies in the world, had a vested interest in keeping this technology from seeing the light of day. They'd lose billions if Holloway's invention succeeded. They sat in silence, the weight of their discovery hanging over them. Holloway had been trying to change the world, but instead, it seemed the world had been trying to change him. And the forces working against him were not just any ordinary corporations, they were the largest, most powerful companies on the planet. As they continued reading, Madison and Joseph discovered something even more unsettling. Holloway wasn't working alone. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that the inventor had been part of a much larger, hidden network, one that included scientists, former employees, activists, and whistleblowers who had been fighting against the energy establishment for decades. In one of Holloway's notebooks, they found a detailed list of names and contact information, all of them linked by their involvement in the development of alternative energy technologies. These were people who had also been working on clean energy, green technologies, and innovative scientific breakthroughs that could revolutionize the world's energy systems. But it wasn't just their research that linked them together, it was their shared understanding of the immense danger they faced from the corporations that sought to bury their work. Joseph read aloud from a letter Holloway had written to one of his allies. Asterisk, "I've reached out to a network of people who share my vision. They're out there, in the shadows, working on similar projects. They understand the risks. They've all seen what happens when someone tries to go public with a breakthrough. They will try to discredit us, destroy our reputations, or worse, take everything we've worked for." Asterisk. Madison's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't just fighting for his own invention, he was protecting a movement that could change everything. Joseph continued reading. Asterisk, "I've made arrangements for the future. If I can't finish this work, I've hidden the plans with trusted people. You'll know who they are when the time comes. Trust no one else. The enemy is everywhere, and they will stop at nothing to destroy this technology." Asterisk. Holloway's foresight was chilling. He had known that his work would make him a target, and he had prepared for it by creating a network of like-minded individuals who could carry on the fight if he were silenced. Madison and Joseph now realized that they weren't just dealing with a lone inventor. They were dealing with a legacy, a movement that had been kept alive through underground channels. It was only a few days after they made their discovery that the first real threat arrived. Madison and Joseph were going through Holloway's old journals in their apartment when there was a knock at the door. They exchanged wary glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and after what they had uncovered, they were both jumpy. Joseph slowly stood up, peeking through the peephole. His body went rigid when he saw a man in a suit standing outside. The man was holding a briefcase and had the kind of professional demeanor that suggested he was someone important. "Who is it?" Madison whispered, sensing Joseph's tension. "I don't know," he muttered, stepping away from the door. "But something doesn't feel right." They stood frozen for a moment, but after a few seconds of silence, the man knocked again, more forcefully this time. Joseph turned to Madison. We need to figure out what's going on. Don't open the door unless I say so, okay? Madison nodded, her pulse racing. She had never felt so on edge. Joseph cautiously cracked the door open, just enough to speak to the man without fully revealing himself. Can I help you? The man smiled politely but with an unnerving calmness. Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin, I presume? Joseph's grip on the door tightened. Who are you? My name is Victor Dorian. I represent certain interests that are concerned with your recent discovery. He spoke smoothly, as if everything about their situation was perfectly normal. Madison's heart skipped a beat. What interests? Dorian's smile faded slightly. The people you've been researching, Graham Holloway, to be specific. We know what you've found, and we think it would be best if we had a discussion about it. Joseph's mind was racing. There was no way he was going to let this man inside. But before he could respond, Dorian added, We know about the documents, the coins, the blueprints, and we also know about the network you've uncovered. Holloway's secret was meant to stay hidden for a reason. You've made a mistake by getting involved. Madison felt a chill sweep through her as the man's words sank in. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We want you to stop, Dorian replied, his tone cold and calculated. We can make sure this all goes away. No one needs to get hurt. But if you continue down this path, things will get complicated. Joseph exchanged a glance with Madison. This wasn't just a man showing up at their door. This was a warning. They had uncovered something far bigger than they had ever realized, and someone wanted them to stay quiet. I don't think we're interested in your offer, Joseph said, his voice steady, though his hands were clenched in fists at his sides. Dorian gave a small, almost amused nod. I was afraid you'd say that, he said, his voice hardening. Just know that you're not dealing with something simple. There are powers at play here, forces that you have no understanding of. If you think you can just expose Holloway's work to the world, you're gravely mistaken. With that, Dorian turned and walked away, leaving Joseph and Madison standing in stunned silence, their hearts pounding. As they watched the man disappear down the hall, Madison turned to Joseph, her voice shaky. What just happened? Who was that guy? Joseph closed the door, locking it tightly behind him. I think we just made ourselves targets. The words hung in the air, a chilling realization settling over them. They weren't just uncovering a revolutionary invention. They were up against an entire network of powerful forces determined to keep it hidden. And the real fight was only just beginning. The morning after their unsettling encounter with Victor Dorian left Madison and Joseph feeling more isolated and vulnerable than ever. They sat in their small apartment, the dim light of the living room barely cutting through the weight of the silence that hung between them. They had known that their discovery was big, but nothing had prepared them for the full scope of the conspiracy they had unwittingly stumbled into. For the past few days, they had been researching Holloway's invention, an energy technology capable of harnessing limitless power from the environment. As they sifted through the documents, blueprints, and patent applications, they had started to piece together a picture of a man who had spent decades working to create something that could change the world. But the more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Holloway's work was not just suppressed by a single company. It was actively targeted by a coalition of energy giants that had been fighting to control the world's energy resources for decades. Madison sat back in her chair, her mind racing as she reread one of the letters they had uncovered. It was from Holloway to a former colleague, detailing the extent of the corporate conspiracy against his work. As she read the words, her stomach churned. Asterisk, the energy sector is not as it seems. It's controlled by a few corporations that have been working in tandem for years to suppress any technology that could challenge their monopoly. They will stop at nothing to prevent the release of my invention. I've seen the connections between them, how they've worked to discredit anyone who tries to break free of their control. If I fail to hide my work, they will destroy it and me. Asterisk. Joseph walked into the living room, holding a freshly brewed cup of coffee. What's going on? He asked, noticing the tension in Madison's face. These letters. Holloway wasn't just fighting one company. It wasn't just about one group of powerful people, it's an entire network. These corporations have been colluding for years to keep alternative energy technologies buried. Joseph leaned over her shoulder, reading the letter. His voice dropped as he processed the information. A cartel. Energy giants working together to suppress anything that threatens their control. They've been protecting their fossil fuel empires, preventing new technologies from seeing the light of day. Madison nodded, her mind still processing. If Holloway's technology worked, it would change everything. No more reliance on oil, coal, or gas. The world would be able to harness energy from the environment itself, free energy. No wonder they're willing to go to any lengths to keep it hidden. The implications were staggering. These weren't just powerful corporations, they were the very backbone of the world's energy industry. The scale of their influence stretched across governments, financial markets, and industries worldwide. Madison and Joseph had uncovered a secret that threatened their entire existence. As the days passed, their discovery began to feel less like a breakthrough and more like a curse. They had no idea just how dangerous the game they had entered was. In their initial excitement, they had convinced themselves that exposing Holloway's invention could lead to a revolution, a future of clean, unlimited energy. But now they were facing an unimaginable force that would stop at nothing to keep that future from becoming a reality. It started small, unexplained phone calls, strange figures watching them from across the street, the sense of being followed wherever they went. But soon, the danger became undeniable. Madison's phone buzzed late one evening, breaking the quiet between them. She glanced at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello," she answered, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "Stop." The voice on the other end was low and cold. "You don't know what you've uncovered, but trust me, you don't want to find out. Drop this investigation before it's too late." Madison's heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" she demanded, her pulse quickening. There was a pause, followed by a sinister chuckle. "I can't say, but I think you understand. Walk away. Now." The line went dead. Madison stared at the phone, her hand shaking slightly as she lowered it. Joseph was already beside her, his expression tight with concern. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low. I don't know. Someone just called and warned me to stop. They said it wasn't too late to back out." Joseph exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "This is getting serious. We have to be careful. We knew there was a risk. But this is more than we bargained for." Madison nodded, her eyes wide. "It's not just about the technology anymore. This is bigger than we are. We've opened a Pandora's box." That night, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every car that passed their apartment seemed to slow down. Every shadow that moved outside their windows made them jump. They had no idea who was after them, but they could feel the presence of danger closing in. The next day, they received an unexpected visit from someone they had been corresponding with, the man who had claimed to be part of the underground network Holloway had been working with. His name was Tom Anderson, a former scientist who had worked alongside Holloway in the early days of his research. Tom was in his mid-40s, with graying hair and the look of someone who had been through far more than they should have. He came highly recommended by the few trusted individuals they had met through the network, and they had been relying on him for advice and insight into Holloway's work. When Tom showed up at their door, he was clearly rattled, his eyes darting around as if he feared he was being watched. He motioned for them to let him inside quickly. "I don't have much time," he whispered as soon as the door was closed. "You have to stop what you're doing." Madison and Joseph exchanged a glance. "What do you mean?" Joseph asked, his voice low but steady. "I've been part of this network for a long time, but I've seen things, heard things that make me question everything. You've gone too far, and now you're drawing attention to yourselves. People are watching you." Madison felt a chill. "What do you mean? Who's watching us?" Tom hesitated, his gaze flicking nervously to the window. I can't say much. But there's someone inside the network, someone who's been feeding information to the corporations. They know you've found Holloway's work, and they'll stop at nothing to get it back." Madison's stomach dropped. "What are you saying? You think we've been betrayed?" Tom's face turned pale. "I'm not sure who it is, but I've been getting messages, subtle ones. Someone's been feeding them your movements, your conversations. The corporations are closing in on you. I'm telling you, if you don't stop, if you don't leave now, you won't make it out of this alive." Joseph stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Who's the mole, Tom?" Who's betraying us? Tom shook his head, his hands trembling. I don't know yet, but I'm telling you, it's someone in the network, someone who has access to everything you've been doing. You've got to trust me, this is bigger than you think. Madison felt her chest tighten. We've been working with people we thought were allies, and now you don't know who you can trust. Tom finished for her. You've got to get out of here. It's not safe anymore. But before they could react, the sound of a car pulling up outside made them freeze. Tom's eyes widened in panic. They're here. They know. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The strange cars, the surveillance, the mysterious phone calls. It wasn't just paranoia. Someone had been watching them all along. We need to leave. Now, Joseph said, his voice urgent. He grabbed the documents they had uncovered and shoved them into a bag. Tom grabbed the doorknob, but as he turned, he paused. I wish I could help, but I can't. I don't have the answers. But you do. It's up to you now. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. The door opened, and they stepped into the hallway, their hearts racing. The world they had thought they understood was now slipping away, and with it, their sense of safety. They had entered a war they weren't prepared for, and now, the stakes were higher than ever. As they hurried down the stairs, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They had just learned that their closest ally was now a suspect, and the truth of Holloway's invention was slipping further out of their grasp. Someone inside their own network had betrayed them, and the corporations were closing in faster than they could run. With the danger escalating, the couple had to make a choice: go into hiding and disappear, or fight back against the powerful forces that would stop at nothing to keep Holloway's invention buried forever. But whatever they chose, it was clear that there was no going back now. The conspiracy was deeper than they had ever imagined, and it was only just beginning. The tension between Madison and Joseph had never been greater. They had discovered a technological breakthrough that could change the world, only to find themselves embroiled in a conspiracy far beyond their understanding. The betrayal by someone within the underground network had shattered their trust, and now, with the prototype of Holloway's device in the wrong hands, they were desperate to get it back. As the days passed, they found themselves on the run, with no one to rely on but each other. The map that Holloway had left behind, the carefully hidden clues to the prototype's location, was their only guide. But the deeper they ventured into this underground world of secrecy and corporate espionage, the clearer it became. The stakes were higher than they could have imagined. The journey to uncover the prototype was far more perilous than either of them anticipated. Holloway had hidden it so well, in fact, that even the most experienced members of the underground network had failed to locate it. But through a series of encrypted messages, hidden references in Holloway's journals, and a bit of good fortune, they had finally tracked down the location: a secret underground lab, buried deep beneath the city, far from the prying eyes of the world. The lab was located in an industrial sector, tucked away between abandoned warehouses. It had all the hallmarks of a place that had been long forgotten, hidden in the shadows by those who had once worked there. The street was desolate, and the buildings around it were in a state of decay. But beneath the surface, something far more valuable lay in wait. Madison and Joseph stood before a nondescript building with a steel door, the last location on their map. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They knew they had little time. The corporations were already moving to seize control of Holloway's invention, and the longer they delayed, the more likely it was that the prototype would disappear forever. Joseph found the key code hidden behind a rusted panel on the side of the building. His fingers trembled as he entered the numbers, each beep of the keypad echoing in the still air. The door clicked open with an almost imperceptible sound, and they stepped inside. The lab was nothing like they had imagined. It was pristine, untouched by time or neglect, as if someone had preserved it carefully for years, waiting for the right moment. Fluorescent lights flickered to life overhead, casting a harsh, clinical glow across the space. On one side of the room stood a large metal table, covered in tools and scattered papers. But it was the object in the center of the room that drew their eyes: the prototype. It was a sleek, sophisticated device, unlike anything either of them had ever seen. It looked like a fusion of modern technology and futuristic design, a complex array of wires, panels, and blinking lights. The device was more advanced than any of Holloway's blueprints had suggested, its potential far greater than anything they could have imagined. It was clear now that this invention wasn't just about providing energy. It was about reshaping the very fabric of global power. "What is this thing?" Madison whispered, awe in her voice as she took in the design. This could change everything." Joseph nodded, his mind racing as he took in the machine's intricate details. "This isn't just a generator, it's something more. This could power entire cities, entire nations, without relying on fossil fuels. It's a complete game changer." He stepped closer, running his fingers over the surface of the device. This could make all the oil, gas, and coal industries obsolete. No wonder they've been trying to suppress it. Madison's stomach tightened at the realization. If the prototype was activated and made public, it could end the energy monopolies that had ruled the world for centuries. But if it fell into the wrong hands, it could shift the balance of power in ways they couldn't predict. But before they could make any decisions, they discovered the truth they had feared. The prototype was no longer in their hands. They had been played. The betrayal was more than just a passing act of treachery. It was part of a larger scheme designed to get the prototype into the hands of the very people they were trying to fight. The mole within the underground network had been feeding them false information, steering them toward dead ends while secretly working with the corporations to recover the device. It was all part of a coordinated effort to regain control of Holloway's invention. Madison and Joseph were blindsided. They had trusted the underground network, believing that they were allies in the fight to release Holloway's technology to the world. But now they realized that the forces working against them were far more powerful and far more ingrained than they had ever anticipated. "What do we do now?" Madison asked, her voice barely above a whisper as they stared at the empty space where the prototype had been. "We've lost it. It's gone." Joseph's jaw clenched. "We can't give up. We can't let them win. We need to find it, and we need to stop them from using it for their own gain." But the task was no longer simple. They were no longer just trying to uncover the truth. They were now racing against a global conspiracy that had the resources, the money, and the influence to bury Holloway's invention forever. And as the days passed, Madison and Joseph realized that the conspiracy went deeper than they ever could have imagined. The corporations weren't just trying to suppress the technology, they were trying to control it, to weaponize it, and to use it for their own agendas. The plot took a shocking turn when Madison and Joseph discovered the identity of the person who had betrayed them, someone they had considered a close ally. The underground network had been infiltrated by a corporate mole who had been feeding them false leads and distracting them at every turn. The mole's identity came to light when they received an encrypted message from an anonymous source, someone claiming to have proof of the mole's treachery. The message contained surveillance footage of their supposed ally, Tom Anderson, meeting with a corporate executive, a man with deep ties to the energy companies they were trying to expose. The footage showed Anderson handing over key documents, including detailed plans for the prototype, to the corporate giant, in exchange for money and influence. Madison felt her blood run cold as she watched the video. "Tom? No. He was the one person I thought we could trust. He promised us he was on our side." Joseph's eyes narrowed. "He was playing us from the start. He was feeding us false information to lead us right into the trap. All along, he was working for them." The revelation hit them like a punch to the gut. They had trusted Anderson, had relied on him for guidance, believing him to be a part of the fight for Holloway's legacy. But now they understood that the mole had been closer to them than they realized. "We have to get the prototype back," Joseph said, determination hardening his voice. "We can't let him or them win." But even as they made plans to track down the device, the stakes grew higher. Anderson's betrayal meant that the clock was ticking faster. The corporations now had the upper hand, and they were ready to deploy every resource at their disposal to secure Holloway's technology. Madison and Joseph were no longer fighting against a few bad actors. They were facing an organized, global effort to silence the truth. The betrayal by Anderson felt like a personal wound, one that cut deeper than anything they had faced so far. But there was no time to dwell on the loss. As Madison and Joseph steeled themselves for the next phase of their mission, they knew one thing for certain: they had to act quickly. The prototype was now in the hands of the enemy, and with it, the power to change the world. But if the corporations succeeded in controlling it, The consequences could be catastrophic. The couple's resolve hardened as they set out to find the prototype, knowing that every step they took would bring them closer to an unavoidable confrontation with the forces that sought to control Holloway's legacy. And this time, they couldn't afford to lose. Madison and Joseph had come to realize that the conspiracy they had unearthed was more vast and insidious than they could have ever imagined. As the days passed and they uncovered more about Holloway's invention, the energy device that had the power to change the world, they began to see a troubling pattern. Not only were powerful corporate giants involved, but the very institutions meant to protect them, the government and its agencies, had been complicit in the effort to suppress the technology. The weight of their discovery began to press down on them, like an invisible hand wrapping tighter and tighter around their necks. Holloway's work wasn't just being hidden by a few powerful corporations, it was being buried by the very institutions that should have been fighting for transparency and justice. It began with a seemingly innocuous phone call. Madison had been trying to track down more information on Holloway's associates when she received an email from an anonymous source. The message, short and cryptic, read, **, the truth is buried deeper than you think. Follow the money trail to the FBI. You'll find the answers you're looking for. But don't trust anyone, not even them." The message made her blood run cold. The FBI? The very organization that was supposed to uphold the law? Madison shared the message with Joseph, her heart racing as she wondered what kind of rabbit hole they had just fallen down. Together, they began to dig deeper into the FBI's involvement, researching public records, government contracts, and any hint of corruption that might be tied to Holloway's work. What they found left them reeling. It wasn't just a few corrupt individuals within the FBI, it was the entire agency's complicity in protecting corporate interests. Holloway's invention, the energy device capable of harnessing unlimited power from the environment, was a threat to the fossil fuel industry. And in turn, the industry's influence had reached into the heart of the government. The FBI, the agency tasked with investigating crimes and protecting the public, had become a tool of the corporations, working behind the scenes to suppress technologies that threatened their control over the energy sector. Joseph paced the room, the implications of what they had discovered sinking in. The government isn't just sitting idly by while the corporations suppress the technology, they're actively involved in protecting the corporate interests. They're on the payroll. Madison's mind raced as she pieced together the details. The FBI has been helping cover up the suppression of alternative energy technologies. Holloway's work wasn't just buried by companies, it was buried with the help of the government. Joseph ran his hands through his hair. And we've been trusting them. All along we thought we could go to them for help if things got too dangerous. But they're part of the problem. They're working with the enemy. The revelation hit them hard. They had believed that, if it came to it, the FBI could help them expose the conspiracy. But now they realized that the government, far from being a neutral force, was actively working to protect the very companies that were trying to suppress Holloway's work. They had been fighting a battle on two fronts, one with corporate giants, and the other with the very institutions they had once trusted to keep them safe. The next day, as Madison and Joseph continued to investigate, they received another unexpected visit. This time, it wasn't from corporate spies or shady government officials. This time, it was from the FBI itself. The knock on the door was firm, urgent. Madison and Joseph exchanged wary glances before Joseph stepped toward the door, peering through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood outside, his expression stern and professional. He looked every bit the part of an FBI agent, clean-cut, well-dressed, and carrying a briefcase. "Are you expecting anyone?" Madison whispered. "No," Joseph replied, his tone low. "But it looks like they're here for us." Joseph hesitated before opening the door. He kept a few feet between himself and the agent, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. The man flashed his FBI badge with practiced efficiency. "Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin?" the agent asked in a clipped tone. "Yes," Joseph replied, his voice guarded. "I'm Special Agent Thomas Banks. I've been investigating a matter related to your recent discovery, Holloway's invention, I presume?" Banks's eyes flicked over Joseph's shoulder, scanning the apartment as if searching for something. His gaze lingered on the stack of documents they had left on the kitchen table. Madison felt her pulse quicken. They hadn't told anyone about their discovery, except for a few underground allies. How did the FBI know? Banks stepped forward, forcing Joseph to step aside. I've been investigating the suppression of energy technologies. I'm here to offer my assistance in helping you with your investigation. Joseph's heart sank. He had expected trouble, but this was a dangerous game they were playing, and now the FBI was involved too. Why would you want to help us? Madison asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. You're with the FBI, right? The same organization that's been working with the corporations to cover this up? Agent Banks smiled tightly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm not here to discuss politics, ma'am. I'm here because I know you've uncovered something important, and I need to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The words hung in the air like a threat. Madison and Joseph exchanged a glance, the unease in their hearts growing. This wasn't the help they had been expecting. This was a man who had come to control the situation, not to aid them. You've been looking into this too? Joseph asked, his voice calm but firm. You're investigating the conspiracy? Banks's smile faded. I'm investigating it in the context of national security. Some things are above your understanding, Mr. Benjamin. You've gotten too close to something dangerous. People who have access to this technology cannot be trusted to let it spread without oversight. Madison felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. This wasn't just an FBI agent offering help, this was someone trying to control the narrative. Someone who wasn't on their side. Who are you working for? Madison demanded, her voice rising. The corporations? The government? Because if you're not here to help, you're in the way. Agent Banks stepped back slightly, his face hardening. I'm here because I want to keep you safe. But if you continue this investigation, you'll put yourselves and others in danger. The people who want this technology silenced will stop at nothing to ensure it stays that way. Joseph took a step forward, his voice cold. We're not backing down. You're not going to intimidate us. We know what's at stake here, and we're going to expose it, no matter who's trying to stop us. The agent's eyes narrowed. He took a step back, his hand inching toward his briefcase. Madison braced herself for whatever came next, but the agent only said, I didn't want it to come to this, but if you continue down this path, you'll be making a serious mistake. The FBI isn't your enemy, but if you force our hand, we'll treat you like any other threat. With that, he turned on his heel and left without another word. Madison and Joseph stood in stunned silence as the door clicked shut behind the agent. The weight of his words lingered in the air like smoke threats, warnings, a promise that the FBI was watching them, and that they were now caught in a web they couldn't escape. We can't trust them, Joseph said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. The FBI's not on our side. They're part of this, just like the corporations. Madison nodded, her hands trembling. They've been watching us from the start. They know what we've uncovered, and they're trying to stop us from exposing it. We're on our own now. The fight had just escalated to a whole new level. The FBI, once seen as a force for justice, had now become another piece in the corporate machine that sought to suppress the truth. And with their options dwindling, Madison and Joseph knew that their only chance of surviving this was to go rogue to expose the conspiracy on their own, before it was too late. But as they prepared for the next phase of their mission, the stakes had never been higher. The government, the corporations, the FBI, everything they had trusted was now compromised. There was no turning back. Madison and Joseph had never felt the weight of their decisions more than they did in the days leading up to the meeting. Holloway's invention, the groundbreaking energy technology that could change the course of history, was no longer just a discovery. It had become a battle for their very survival. The underground network they had once trusted now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the looming presence of the corporate giants who controlled the fate of their world. The truth was, they had no allies left. The FBI was compromised, the underground network had been infiltrated, and now the last remaining step in their mission was a direct confrontation with the CEO of the corporation responsible for suppressing Holloway's work, Victor Harrison of HBC Energy. It had taken weeks of planning, countless hours of deciphering Holloway's notes, and covert communication with the remaining allies of the network, but they had finally arranged the meeting, a private, high-stakes conversation with the man who controlled the world's largest energy monopoly. Madison and Joseph had been preparing for this moment since they first discovered the prototype. but nothing could truly prepare them for the tension and danger that hung in the air as they walked into that luxurious high-rise office in downtown Manhattan. The sleek glass walls of the building seemed to close in on them as they entered Harrison's office. The room was breathtaking in its opulence. Dark mahogany furniture, expensive artwork, and a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was the kind of space that radiated power, wealth, and control. Harrison's office was a testament to the man himself, cold, calculated, and unapologetically extravagant. Victor Harrison, the CEO of HBC Energy, stood by the window, his back to them as he looked out at the city below. His voice was smooth and confident as he turned to face them. "Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin," he said, his smile insincere. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Madison's stomach twisted as she took in his appearance. A man in his late 50s, well-dressed, with sharp features and a demeanor that radiated authority. He was everything they had expected, an embodiment of the corporate power that had been suppressing Holloway's invention for decades. "We've come to talk," Joseph said, his voice firm but restrained. "We're not here to negotiate. We're here to make sure that Holloway's technology gets the exposure it deserves." Harrison's eyes gleamed with a hint of amusement. He crossed the room and took a seat behind his massive desk, folding his hands in front of him. "Of course, you've made quite the discovery," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Holloway's work is impressive, to say the least. But I'm sure you understand that such technology cannot simply be released to the public without consequence." Madison felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. This wasn't a conversation about science or progress. It was a conversation about control and power. She and Joseph had come here to expose the truth, but Harrison wasn't interested in that. He was interested in keeping the technology under his thumb. "I know what you're trying to do," Harrison continued, leaning back in his chair. "You're trying to bring about a new era of energy, one that threatens everything we've built. The entire energy industry, the infrastructure, the way people live and work. HBC Energy has invested decades, billions of dollars, into creating the systems that keep the world running. And you want to throw all that away for what? A new invention that could destabilize everything?" Joseph stepped forward, his jaw tight with frustration. "We're not trying to destabilize anything. We're trying to bring about a future where people aren't dependent on fossil fuels. Holloway's invention could power the world cleanly, sustainably. It's not about profit, it's about survival." Harrison's lips curled into a smile. "You're naive, Mr. Benjamin. You don't understand the complexities of the world you're trying to change. What Holloway created, what you think is going to save humanity, could destroy everything you've ever known. The energy market isn't just about supply and demand. It's about control. And once that control is lost, the world becomes unmanageable." Madison exchanged a glance with Joseph, her heart pounding. She had expected Harrison to try and manipulate them, but she hadn't expected this level of cold calculation. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a man who had built an empire by exploiting the world's energy resources, and he wasn't going to let go of it easily. "That's where you're wrong," Madison said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "The world doesn't need control, it needs freedom. Holloway's invention isn't just a way to power cities, it's a way to free people from the grip of energy monopolies like yours." Harrison's smile faltered for just a second, and in that brief moment, Madison saw the true extent of the threat they were facing. He wasn't just trying to preserve an industry, he was trying to preserve his own power. And that power was something he would stop at nothing to protect. Harrison leaned forward, his fingers tapping on the edge of his desk. "I understand your idealism, but I'm not interested in your crusade. What I am offering you is simple. Walk away, take the money, and leave this whole mess behind. I can make sure you're taken care of. No more debt, a future without struggle. You'll never have to work again, and you'll never have to worry about your safety. All you have to do is walk away from this." The offer hung in the air like a tempting promise. It was everything Madison and Joseph had dreamed of, a life without financial burden, the freedom to live without fear. Harrison was offering them an escape, a way out of the chaos they had unwittingly found themselves in. All they had to do was agree to keep Holloway's technology hidden and let the corporations continue to control the world. Joseph looked at Madison, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You think we're going to sell out?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Harrison's smile returned. I think you'll do what's best for you, for your future. This isn't just about an invention, it's about survival. Your survival. Take the money, and you can walk away from all of this. Madison felt the weight of the offer pressing down on her. It was so easy to say yes. So easy to take the deal and forget about everything they had uncovered. The betrayal, the lies, the corporations trying to keep the truth buried. But then she thought about Holloway. She thought about the man who had risked everything to create something that could change the world, and she couldn't let it go. We're not walking away, Madison said, her voice firm. We came here to expose the truth, to make sure Holloway's legacy lives on. We're not going to let you or anyone else stop us. Harrison's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. You have no idea what you're up against. If you release this technology, you'll destroy everything. You'll bring chaos. Do you really think the world is ready for what Holloway created? We don't care, Joseph said, his voice unwavering. The world deserves the truth, and we're going to make sure it gets it, no matter what it costs us. Harrison stood up, his face cold. Then you're more naive than I thought. You won't make it out of here alive. You'll be hunted, just like Holloway was. And when they come for you, no one will help you. The words hung in the air, a final warning that felt more like a threat. Madison and Joseph knew they had just made a dangerous enemy, a man who had the power to destroy them if they didn't back down. But they had made their decision. They couldn't walk away, not when so much was at stake. As they left Harrison's office, the tension between them was palpable. They had come to confront the man who had been behind the conspiracy, but they had just stepped into an even more dangerous game. There was no turning back now. They had refused the deal. They had chosen the truth. But as they walked down the hallway toward the elevator, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that Harrison's words had been more than just a warning. They had entered a fight for their lives, and the battle was far from over. The final showdown was only just beginning. The weight of their decision hung heavily on Madison and Joseph. Refusing Victor Harrison's offer had sealed their fate, but it had also set them on a path they could no longer turn back from. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, and now they were prepared to unleash the truth. Holloway's invention, the device that could revolutionize the world's energy systems, was no longer a secret. It was time to expose the corporate giants who had spent decades suppressing it, and make the truth known to the world. The couple had spent the past few days frantically preparing for the one moment that could change everything. With the help of their remaining underground allies and a small network of tech-savvy activists, they had set up a secure broadcast system that would reach millions, an unprecedented live stream that would showcase Holloway's technology for the first time ever. There was no turning back now. The night before the broadcast, Madison and Joseph sat together in a small, dimly lit apartment, nervously sipping coffee as they checked and rechecked their plan. The encrypted servers were in place. The broadcast software had been tested. They had a small, but highly secure team of supporters in multiple locations around the world, all set to help distribute the stream once it went live. We're doing the right thing, Joseph said, his voice low but filled with conviction. His hands were clenched around the coffee mug, the exhaustion from the past few weeks taking its toll. But there was no room for doubt now. Madison nodded, though the weight of what they were about to do pressed heavily on her. This is bigger than us, Joseph. If we don't do this, no one will. No one will know the truth. Holloway's legacy will disappear, and the corporations will continue to control everything. She stared at the laptop in front of them, where a countdown clock ticked down the final minutes until they went live. The device, Holloway's invention, was secured in a location miles away, ready to be revealed to the world. All that remained was to push the button. I know, Joseph replied, taking her hand. But there's no turning back. Once we do this, it's out there. We can't control how the world reacts. Madison swallowed hard, trying to push past the anxiety. We've already seen what the corporations are willing to do to protect their control over energy. They'll stop at nothing to bury this. But this is our only shot. If we can just show the world what Holloway created, it might be enough. As the countdown continued, a sense of determination washed over her. This wasn't just about bringing Holloway's work to light, it was about breaking the stranglehold of the energy industry, about giving the world a chance to choose a better future. A future powered by clean, sustainable energy. Finally, the time arrived. Joseph leaned forward, clicking the button that would start the global broadcast. The screen flickered, and within seconds, the world was watching. The broadcast began with a brief introduction. Madison and Joseph appeared on screen, their faces tired but resolute, standing in front of a backdrop that displayed images of Holloway's energy device. Behind them, a video loop played showing the inner workings of the technology, its sleek design, its intricate mechanisms, and the complex systems that allowed it to harness energy from the environment. "Good evening," Joseph began, his voice steady, despite the nerves tightening in his chest. "We are Madison and Joseph Benjamin, and today, we are here to reveal something that has been kept hidden from the world for far too long." Madison stepped forward, her voice firm. "What you're about to see is the culmination of decades of work by the late Graham Holloway, a visionary who created a device capable of harnessing the natural energy present in the environment around us. This technology has the potential to end the world's dependence on fossil fuels, providing clean, unlimited energy for everyone." The camera zoomed in on the device, and the screen split, showing detailed animations of how it worked. The blueprints, the technical drawings, the very patent that had once been buried in a storage unit, were now being shared with the world. Holloway's invention wasn't just a pipe dream. It wasn't a theory or a concept, it was real. The device worked, and in a matter of moments, millions of people around the globe would witness the future of energy unfold in front of their eyes. "We know this may sound impossible," Joseph continued, his voice unwavering, "but what we're showing you tonight is not science fiction. It's not a hypothetical, it's real. It's ready. It's here." Madison turned to the camera, her eyes filled with determination. "What's been hidden from the public, suppressed by powerful corporations who have controlled energy for decades, is finally being revealed. Today, the world learns the truth. Today, the future of energy changes forever." The screen flickered again as an animation played, showing the device powering an entire city, with no emissions, no fossil fuels, just pure, sustainable energy drawn from the air itself. The possibilities were endless: cities, homes, transportation, all running on clean energy that would never run out. The couple stepped back as the broadcast continued, showcasing the prototype in action, with scientists explaining its functions and potential. Holloway's work was no longer just a set of blueprints, it was a fully realized, working technology that could transform the world's energy systems. For the first time in history, the world was seeing what had been hidden away for so long. The broadcast spread like wildfire, reaching millions of people around the globe. In every corner of the world, people tuned in, eager to learn about the invention that could change their lives forever. As the broadcast continued, Madison and Joseph watched the views climb, the numbers growing exponentially with every passing second. They could see the reaction in real time, the shock, the disbelief, and then the awe, as people began to understand the scale of what they were witnessing. News outlets picked up the broadcast, sharing it across social media, television, and news websites. Politicians and environmental activists hailed the discovery as a breakthrough for humanity. Scientists from around the world began to analyze the technology, confirming its feasibility and potential. Within hours, protests broke out in major cities, protests calling for the immediate release of the technology. People were demanding that the corporations be held accountable for suppressing Holloway's work for so long. The public's outrage was palpable, and it wasn't just about the technology itself. It was about the truth that had been kept from them for decades. But with the praise and excitement came something darker. The corporations, HBC Energy, the oil giants, the fossil fuel barons, were not going to sit idly by and watch their world crumble. Behind closed doors, meetings were being held, legal teams were mobilized, and corporate executives were scrambling to figure out how to suppress the broadcast. They had never expected such a fast, widespread reaction. Madison and Joseph had made it clear that they would not back down, and the corporations, now exposed for their role in the cover-up, were faced with an impossible choice: fight back and risk even more public backlash, or give in and lose their stranglehold on the global energy market. The backlash from the public was swift and severe. Governments across the world began to reconsider their energy policies. Nations like Iceland, Canada, and several European countries, already progressive in their environmental policies, quickly moved to adopt the technology, implementing it into their power grids. In the United States, protests grew louder as citizens demanded a clean energy future. Corporations began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. Stocks plummeted, executives were questioned. People who had once been silent were now speaking out, calling for accountability for the crimes of suppression and exploitation. The United Nations called for an emergency session, where leaders from around the world discussed how to implement the new technology on a global scale. At the same time, the International Criminal Court opened investigations into the corporate executives who had been involved in suppressing Holloway's work, including criminal charges of fraud, conspiracy, and even murder. For the first time in history, the energy industry was forced to reckon with the truth. No longer could they hide behind their wealth and influence. No longer could they control the world's future. As the broadcast came to a close, Madison and Joseph stood together, watching the flood of reactions pour in from around the globe. They had done it. They had exposed the truth. The corporation's reign was over. Holloway's invention, once hidden away in a forgotten storage unit, was now the key to a brighter, more sustainable future. But as the world celebrated, the couple knew their fight wasn't over. The corporations were already planning their next move. There would be legal battles. There would be resistance. And there would be those who would stop at nothing to get their hands on the technology for their own gain. The revolution had begun, but for Madison and Joseph, the true battle was just starting. They had revealed the future of energy. Now, they had to protect it. The world had changed overnight. Madison and Joseph Benjamin sat in their apartment, staring at the glowing screen in front of them. The global broadcast had been an explosive success, but the aftermath was something neither of them had anticipated. Holloway's invention, the revolutionary energy device that had been hidden away for so long, was now in the public domain. The idea that had been buried for decades had finally been exposed, and the world was reacting. The messages of support flooded in from every corner of the globe. People were calling them heroes. Their phones buzzed nonstop, each message more heartwarming than the last, from environmental groups hailing their bravery to citizens praising their willingness to stand against the corporations. The couple had exposed a truth that no one thought could be revealed, and now, the world was rushing toward a future powered by clean, limitless energy. But the cost of their decision was not lost on them. They had risked everything, their safety, their privacy, and their future, to bring Holloway's work into the light. They were no longer just struggling newlyweds working to pay off student debt. They were now central figures in a global revolution. The news was everywhere. Headlines across the world were emblazoned with the words, *, revolutionary energy technology unveiled, the future of power is here, *. Major news outlets, political leaders, and environmental organizations rallied behind the couple. Holloway's invention was now set to reshape the world. Governments in Europe, Asia, and North America scrambled to integrate the technology into their energy systems, eager to shift away from fossil fuels. But not everyone was celebrating. The corporate powers that had spent years suppressing the technology were reeling from the backlash. HBC Energy, the company run by Victor Harrison, was the first to feel the pressure. Stock prices plummeted as investors panicked. Lawsuits began to pile up. Environmental activists, already armed with the knowledge of the corporation's dirty tactics, now had the truth on their side. Madison and Joseph watched, a mixture of relief and disbelief in their eyes, as the first wave of legal actions against the corporations began. Investigations into corporate corruption, suppression of technology, and even the murder of Holloway were now underway. The CEOs of HBC Energy and other major corporations involved in the cover-up were arrested and charged with conspiracy, corporate fraud, and murder. The revelation that Holloway had been murdered to protect the technology was a scandal of international proportions. The trials that followed were nothing short of historic. Executives from the most powerful energy companies were paraded into courtrooms, their actions exposed for the world to see. Holloway's death, once written off as a natural occurrence, was now being investigated as part of a larger plot to silence an inventor whose work threatened the very foundation of the global energy industry. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Journalists, activists, and former employees of the companies involved provided testimonies that painted a picture of a corporate empire willing to do anything to protect its profits, even murder. The trial brought the kind of scrutiny these companies had never imagined, and their grip on power started to slip. As the CEOs were held accountable for their crimes, nations began to reconsider their relationship with energy. Governments took swift action, redirecting their investments into the clean, sustainable technology Holloway had dreamed of. Cities that had long been dependent on coal, oil, and gas began shifting to renewable energy, using Holloway's invention to power homes, businesses, and infrastructure. For Madison and Joseph, the transformation in the world was matched only by the transformation in their own lives. They had become symbols of change, faces that people recognized as the couple who had risked everything to bring the truth to light. Their newfound fame brought both opportunity and responsibility. They received countless offers, from book deals to speaking engagements, to high-level advisory roles in energy policy and sustainability. But for all the attention, they remained focused on one thing: ensuring that Holloway's work stayed in the hands of the people, and that no one could take it away from them. The couple established a foundation in Holloway's name, the Holloway Legacy Foundation, dedicated to continuing his work and advancing sustainable, open-source energy solutions. They partnered with researchers, environmental organizations, and governments to ensure that the technology remained publicly accessible, free from the control of corporate interests. The foundation also funded research into further innovations in energy, medical technology, and sustainable infrastructure, all with the goal of creating a future where the world's resources were shared equitably. Madison and Joseph were careful to avoid the pitfalls of fame. They didn't want to become the faces of the very corporations they had fought against. Instead, they used their platform to amplify the voices of those who had been working toward a cleaner, more sustainable future long before they had even discovered Holloway's invention. The couple moved into a larger home, a place that felt more like a home than their cramped apartment ever had. They were still adjusting to their new reality, but every decision they made was guided by the same principle: to continue the fight Holloway had started, to ensure that the truth would never be buried again. End of the story. The culmination of their journey came when Madison and Joseph were invited to oversee the first clean energy city powered by Holloway's invention. It was a groundbreaking moment, a city that ran entirely on the sustainable, atmospheric energy technology that had once been suppressed by corporate greed. As they stood before a crowd of engineers, environmentalists, and policymakers, Madison and Joseph shared a quiet moment of reflection. The city before them was more than just a victory. It was the physical manifestation of everything they had worked for. Holloway's invention wasn't just powering this city, it was powering the future. "This is just the beginning," Joseph said, his voice filled with awe as he watched the city come to life, powered by the very technology they had uncovered. "This is what we've been fighting for. A future where energy is free, clean, and shared by all." Madison nodded, her heart swelling with pride. This is what Holloway dreamed of, and now it's happening. The world is changing. The skyline before them sparkled with the glow of clean, renewable energy. Streets once choked by the smoke of coal and gas plants were now vibrant, filled with life and promise. The future was no longer something to fear, it was something to look forward to. As they watched the sun set over the city, Madison and Joseph reflected on everything they had gone through. The danger, the betrayals, the sacrifices it had, all led them here. They had risked everything to expose the truth, and in doing so, they had changed the course of history. They were no longer just a struggling couple, they were champions of a new future, the future that Holloway had envisioned. The future that had always been possible, but never given the chance until now. And as they stood there, hand in hand, they knew one thing for certain: the fight wasn't over, but the battle had been won. You stayed till the end? I see you, loyal and curious. But don't go yet, the next story's even crazier. Go on, click that video. You know you want to.